Rhythms that awaken the heart and speak the language of struggle, hope, and freedom. South African music is not just about Antwoord. It's the story of people who survived apartheid, found their voice, and created a unique cultural code. This is a country where jazz became a symbol of resistance, where the streets of Johannesburg gave birth to loud Kwaito, and the clubs lit the flames of Amapiano. Today you'll learn how oppression influenced creativity, how music united divided hearts, and why African rhythms resonate on world stages today. What is apartheid? Why is South Africa truly a country of jazz? And to whom did Louis Armstrong give his own saxophone? How did South Africans invent new genres? And how did they manage not only to listen to great musicians, but also to create them under conditions of total control? You are on the Melomania channel, and we're going on a musical journey through South Africa. The history of South African music is inseparable from its history of its peoples and their cultural traditions. Before the arrival of European colonizers in the 15th century, music in this region served not only as entertainment but also as a tool for communication, preservation of history, and support of spiritual traditions. The territory of South Africa was home to various ethnic groups, including the Khoisan, Bushmen and Hottentot, and the Bantu. Each of these groups had unique musical traditions that reflected their lifestyle, spiritual beliefs, and connection to nature. The Khoisan, as one of the most ancient peoples of the region, had an extremely developed oral tradition, where music often accompanied rituals related to hunting, rain, or healing the sick. The Bantu peoples began migrating southward about 2,000 years ago. Their music was closely associated with significant events, weddings, funerals, initiation rites, and other rituals. The basis of Bantu music was percussion instruments. Drums, kalimbas, that is, African pianos, and maracas. Dancing and music accompanied almost all important moments of life, as it was believed that it helps maintain contact with ancestors, ensure success in hunting, and causes rain. Musical performances were often combined with dances that had deep symbolic meaning. For example, many Bantu peoples had ritual dances that imitated the movements of animals or natural phenomena. The instruments, though primitive, were ingenious. Wind instruments were made from animal horns or bamboo, while the kalimba was made from reeds or metal. It was a plucked instrument that produced melodious and soothing sounds. A modern version of this instrument might sound like this. Nature's had a huge influence on the music of the indigenous peoples of South Africa. The sounds of animals, rain, or wind often became a source of inspiration for musicians. For example, some songs imitated the sounds of nature to bring people closer to the spirits of the land. In the 17th century, Europeans, first the Dutch and later the British, began colonizing the region. The colonists brought with them Western music, church hymns, European classical music, and folk dances. Along with Christian missionaries, the tradition of choral singing spread, becoming an important element of the culture of many African communities. Polyphonic choral compositions, which combined European harmonies with African rhythms, developed particularly well. This gave rise to isicathamiya, a form of vocal music that remains one of the most popular in South Africa to this day. Isicathamiya originated among Zulu workers who migrated to the cities in search of work in mines and industry. In the evenings, after a hard day at work, men would gather in their dormitories to sing songs that helped maintain a sense of community and relieve stress. This is the style performed by the choral group Ladysmith Black Mambazo. Unfortunately, much of South Africa's history is a history of racial inequality, which began with the Europeans' arrival. They brought not only their music, but also new rules. In 1652, the Dutch East India Company founded Cape Town as a trading post and later began to seize the lands of local African peoples. Later, control over these territories passed to Britain, which solidified the absolute dominance of Europeans in the region. The discovery of diamonds and gold in the late 19th century led to an economic boom, but also deepened racial inequality as indigenous Africans were used as cheap labor, denied land rights, and access to education. After gaining independence from Great Britain in 1910, South Africa became a dominion. That is, the country conditionally gained sovereignty, but power remained in the hands of white settlers. The Natives Land Act of 1913 limited the rights of blacks to own land, with only 7% of all land concentrated in their hands. In 1948, in what was then a British colony called the Union of South Africa, a nationalist white party won the election and began implementing a policy called Apartheid. The voting was hardly fair, as not everyone was able to vote. Translations from Afrikaans, Apartheid means separation. The central idea of apartheid was that each race had its own place and its own occupation. The place of the white race was seen in the city, university, business, politics, and the place of the black race was outside the city, closer to the land, in farming. Apartheid became one of the most repressive systems in modern history, leaving a deep mark on South African society. During apartheid, music became an important means of protest against racial discrimination. Black South Africans used it as a way to express pain, anger, and hope, which gave rise to different musical styles. For example, the Marabi style. It originated in miners' dormitories and combined local rhythms with the influence of American jazz and dance music. Marabi was often accompanied by dances that imitated the movements of miners, and this music became a symbol of the working class. Following this, in the 1960s, South Africans invented another style called mbaqanga. This relatively light, danceable genre combined traditional melodies with instruments such as guitars, saxophones, and accordions, and was popularized by radio stations that targeted black audiences. Songs such as Nkosi Sikelel' iAfrika, Lord Bless Africa, became anthems of resistance. Protest songs often contained codes and symbolism to evade censorship. During the apartheid regime, this song was considered by many to be the unofficial anthem of South Africa, expressing the black population's suffering. The song became so popular that in 1994, after the fall of apartheid, the new president of South Africa, Nelson Mandela, declared it the national anthem. But until then, music had long served as the voice of the oppressed, expressing pain, anger, and hope for a better future when other forms of expression were forbidden. Songs became a way to convey hidden messages, mobilize communities, and preserve identity. Artists often composed songs that directly condemned the apartheid system or used symbolism that their listeners understood. At concerts and underground meetings, music united people, inspiring them to take action. After the government cracked down on non-violent protests, the resistance decided to take up arms. Rebels led by Nelson Mandela sabotaged infrastructure in an attempt to paralyze the apartheid government. In 1976, people started the Soweto Uprising, which began as a student protest but was brutally suppressed, leading to a wave of violence across the country. About 700 people died.
The apartheid government spent 644 rands on a white child's education, as opposed to a mere 42 rands on a black child's education.
After that, resistance was more often cultural, and protest music, primarily jazz, played a major role in it. In the mid-20th century, jazz became one of the most influential musical forms in South Africa, with local musicians such as Hugh Masekela, Miriam Makeba, and Abdullah Ibrahim achieving international recognition. They mixed traditional melodies with jazz improvisations, creating a unique sound that became part of the South African identity. Miriam Makeba, known as Mother Africa, became not only a musical icon, but also a symbol of the struggle against apartheid.
It said no more Xhosa, Sotho, no more Zulu.
Miriam Makeba gained international fame in the 1960s after appearing in the documentary Come Back Africa, which exposed the apartheid brutality. Because of her activism, the South African government stripped her of her citizenship, forcing her to live in exile for 3 decades. Miriam Makeba used her fame to draw the world's attention to the apartheid's brutality. She spoke at the UN, collaborated with other activists, including Nelson Mandela, and supported anti-racist movements. Her creativity and activism made Miriam not only a musical icon, but also a symbol of the fight for freedom and justice. Makeba died in 2008, but her legacy continues to inspire people around the world. There were, of course, other influential artists. Jazz trumpeter and composer Hugh Masekela created music that combined African traditions with protest lyrics. His song, Bring Him Back Home, became an anthem for the fight to free Nelson Mandela, who was in prison at the time. Mandela was imprisoned for his participation in armed resistance to the apartheid regime. For many people in South Africa and around the world, this event became a symbol of the injustice of a system that oppressed millions. The White Zulu, Johnny Clegg, along with his band Juluka, wrote music that combined European and African styles. His songs, such as Asimabonanga, directly called for an end to apartheid and made him one of South Africa's greatest singers. Musicians who opposed the regime were brutally persecuted.
Look across the island into the bay.
Their music was banned, and the artists themselves were often forced to flee the country and live abroad. Many of them lived in exile, but even from there, they continued to create and fight through music. And it was jazz that became the voice of non-violent protest. South African jazz emerged as a synthesis of African musical traditions, such as the rhythms of the Zulu and Xhosa tribes, and influences from Western jazz music brought by colonists and American artists, creating a unique style that was both deeply indigenous and contemporary. Jazz clubs in cities like Johannesburg and Cape Town became safe spaces for people of different ethnicities to meet, even in conditions of segregation. Ideas were born, a culture of resistance was created, and social connections developed. Jazz scenes served as environments where art helped to overcome barriers. In South Africa, jazz was born and developed among musicians who did not have the opportunity to learn to read and write, did not have the right not only to officially perform on stage, but even to physically be in cities to which they were not assigned. In the 1960s, jazz became a music of protest and struggle for one's rights. The genre also began to actively develop outside of South Africa through the efforts of musicians who either decided to leave the country themselves or lost the opportunity to return to it. Sometimes the government simply canceled the passports of musicians who went on tour and said something careless about the authorities. In other words, South African jazz was forged in constant confrontation. Eternal overcoming, prohibitions, lawlessness, repression, and poverty. One of the biggest names not only in jazz but also in South African music is Hugh Masekela. When he was a young musician, legend has it that Louis Armstrong gave him a trumpet. One day, Hugh joined the Huddleston Jazz Band, founded by the priest Trevor Huddleston, a great supporter of music and an anti-apartheid activist. He noticed the guy's enthusiasm and decided to help him find a musical instrument. It was Huddleston who, through his contacts in America, turned to Louis Armstrong, who was essentially the personification of jazz. Legend has it that Armstrong, upon hearing about the young talent from South Africa, not only approved the idea, but also personally sent one of his trumpets to Masekela. The trumpet became for Hugh not just an instrument, but a symbol of inspiration and opportunity. A dream come true. Hugh was great both as a jazz trumpeter and as a creator of bright hit songs that used the language of pop songs of his time and the traditional music of South African peoples with equal precision. He, for example, participated in the jazz musical King Kong, the first production in history created by an all-black troupe. With the help of foreign acquaintances, the trumpeter entered the Guildhall School of Music and Drama in London, and having gone to study, decided not to return to his homeland. Abroad, he, along with the singer Miriam Makeba, to whom he was married for several years, became a kind of chief spokesperson for South Africa. Not only in a cultural sense, but also in a purely informational sense. It was the stories of immigrants that opened the eyes of the international community to what was happening in South Africa under the apartheid regime.
If I had to live without you, I wouldn't wanna live no more.
Pianist Abdullah Ibrahim is another pillar of South African jazz. Masekela's colleague in the Jazz Epistles, Ibrahim, also considered leaving the country and in 1962 managed to move to Europe. There he came into sight of Duke Ellington, a famous American composer. According to legend, Ibrahim's wife, the singer Sathima Bea Benjamin, waited for Ellington after a concert in Zurich and invited him to listen to her husband play at another club. Duke was so impressed that he produced and released several albums by the pianist, which helped the immigrant musician make a name for himself. Of course, that helped, as one of the albums was released with the label Duke Ellington Presents. Ibrahim's discography includes over 70 albums, both solo and collaborative with symphony orchestras for which he wrote individual works. He recorded with Don Cherry, Max Roach, Archie Shepp, and in almost every project he tried to maintain a musical connection to his homeland, to the traditional music of South Africa and the Marabi genre, one of the first South African jazz styles. Another important story of musicians who left South Africa is related to the band The Blue Notes. The mixed racial composition did not make the band's existence in South Africa any easier. So in 1964, after leaving for a festival in France, the Blue Notes decided not to return. After wandering around various European countries for several years, the group settled in London at Ronnie Scott's club, The Old Place. There, its members turned out to be the most important players in the area of the formation of the first generation of British free jazz. As a joint team in its full original lineup and under its original name, the band did not survive until the end of the 60s, but over the next 20 years, the band members recorded a lot of great music. Today, only drummer Louis Mohola remains alive, and he continues to work tirelessly to create one of the most diverse and richest discographies in South African jazz. The last album with his participation, excluding reissues, was released in 2020 when he turned 80. In the 1980s, the South African government attempted to divide the population into 4 groups: white, black, colored, and Asian, limiting their contact and tightly regulating cultural processes. The international community imposed a trade and military embargo on South Africa, and the cultural community boycotted the regime and its supporters. In these conditions, not only jazz but also other musical genres developed, in particular bubblegum, which emerged in the early 1980s under the influence of disco and funk. Although initially entertaining, this genre quickly took on a political connotation, as any artistic gesture could become political. Examples include Steve Kakana and his band Hotline, in which he sang with PJ Powers. Steve is one of the golden voices of 1980s South Africa, and the song Feel So Strong, a classic bubblegum duet between a black man and a white woman, is also indicative of the censorship problems caused by the government's ban on interracial relationships. English-language texts made it possible, firstly, to be in the rotation of several radio stations at once, and therefore to count on a wider audience and sell more records, and secondly, to unite South Africans and overcome the borders and frameworks established by apartheid. Before that, American pop music sold better than local music, but with the bubblegum, everything changed, and labels began to make good profits. Bubblegum stars sold their CDs by the hundreds of thousands. Many considered the term bubblegum to be derogatory, implying that the bright flavor of such music would quickly fade and people would stop listening to it. Therefore, it was often simply called disco, and this is one of the main hits of South African bubblegum. An important part of the apartheid system was the allocation of territories for the indigenous population, Bantustans, which were intended to concentrate representatives of one nationality in a limited area. Each such formation had its own state structures and cultural institutions, including radio stations that promoted ethnic music. From a musical perspective, the establishment of such ethnic radio stations in both the Bantustans and the cities led to the development of the music industry, creating a demand for recordings. In addition, laws in some Bantustans and border areas allowed independent radio stations to broadcast into South Africa, which helped break the government's monopoly on radio and introduce South Africans to foreign music. An interesting story happened with American musician Sixto Rodriguez, who was moderately popular but became an icon in South Africa and didn't even know about it for a long time. Before we move on, we'd like to thank you for subscribing to our channel. There are many interesting videos about music from different countries ahead, so it's important for us to see your interest and support. Thank you, and we will continue. In the 1970s, Rodriguez released 2 albums, Cold Fact and Coming From Reality. However, his music failed to gain popularity in the United States, and after failing in the music industry, he left his career as an artist, returning to manual labor, including work as a construction worker. However, his albums began to circulate clandestinely in South Africa through pirated copies, including Cold Fact, which became the unofficial anthem of the anti-apartheid movement. His songs, including Sugar Man, highlighted social injustice and became relatable to the youth who were fighting the regime.
For a blue coin, won't you bring back all those...
The South African government, fearing the influence of his music, banned radio stations from broadcasting the song Sugar Man due to its insinuations of substance use. The authorities even physically damaged the records containing the song to prevent its playback. However, these actions only fueled interest in his work, and Rodriguez began to be compared to Bob Dylan and other famous rock musicians. Among his supporters was Steve Biko, a leading activist in the anti-apartheid movement. His songs inspired young people to fight, even if Rodriguez himself remained unaware of his influence. After the fall of the apartheid in the 1990s, two Rodriguez fans, Steve Sigerman and Craig Bartholomew Stridham, decided to learn more about their idol. In 1997, they began an investigation to find the musician. At the time, there were rumors that he had died on stage, but it turned out that Rodriguez was still living in Detroit, leading a modest life. They contacted his family online, and after learning of his fame in South Africa, Rodriguez agreed to embark on his first tour of the country. He played 6 sold-out concerts, greeted by thousands of fans. This triumph was a turning point in his life.
For keeping me alive.
His popularity grew in the 2000s, and he toured Australia and Europe. In 2006, the song Sugar Man was featured on the soundtrack of the film Candy, starring Heath Ledger. In 2012, the documentary Searching for Sugar Man, which told the story of his comeback, won an Oscar. It brought Rodriguez international fame, and he performed at major music festivals including Coachella and Glastonbury. Rodriguez became more than just a musician. He embodied hope, strength, and the power of art to change society. His story is not just about a career revival, but also about how music can find its place in the most unexpected corners of the world. South Africa gave Rodriguez a second life, and his work forever remained a symbol of the struggle for freedom and equality. But let's go back to the 80s. Local musicians could only get on the radio after several rounds of checks. Lyrics had to be submitted to state censors for approval, but some labels simply printed the wrong lyrics to get around the censorship system, and they often succeeded. There were many reasons for censorship, usually because of lyrics about religion and sex. Sometimes the motives for censorship were political. Foreign artists who expressed their position on apartheid, such as Stevie Wonder, were also banned. Of course, the name of Nelson Mandela, who was in prison at the time, could not be pronounced on the radio. But singer Chico, riding the wave of popularity, wrote the song We Miss You, Manilo. The video sequence was very distracting and told the wrong story, but it was shown across the country and its message was heard. The network of government radio stations and the lack of other entertainment, especially for the black population, contributed, despite the difficult political situation, to a boom in South African music. It, in turn, created a fairly developed music industry, and more than one. Labels, promoters, concert venues, and music stores emerged and developed in this environment. Among the stars of the 1980s, one can single out Yvonne Chaka Chaka, who was popular not only in South Africa, but also in Zimbabwe, Kenya, Gabon, and other countries. Her success allowed her to become the face of charitable organizations, and she continues to perform to this day. In the 1980s, as independent radio stations not controlled by the government grew, other genres of world music, such as reggae, became available to listeners. As in most other countries, house and hip-hop in South Africa began in the 1980s, probably as records were brought into the country from abroad. Musicians gradually adopted and adapted them. Producers were talented at the time, and many experimented successfully with new drum machines, synthesizers, and samplers. Lucky Dube is an example of how well reggae has taken root in South Africa. Having become popular in the mid-1980s as a performer of traditional Mbaqanga music, he began recording reggae despite pressure from his label. The album Slave sold 500,000 copies, although the title song is about a liquor slave, and the video features bottles being smashed. At concerts, both he and the audience happily sang about a legal slave.
I want a slave, a slave.
Unfortunately, the story of this artist ended quite tragically. In October 2007, he was killed during an attempted carjacking in Johannesburg. The attackers shot him dead in front of his 2 children. The tragedy caused shock and deep sorrow both in South Africa and in the world. Dube was not only a musician, but also a symbol of peace and unity, who spoke out against violence and apartheid. Such cases in South Africa are far from uncommon, but we'll talk about them later. The policy of apartheid lasted until 1994 and was finally abolished. In 1990, Nelson Mandela, who had spent 27 years in prison for his fight against apartheid, was released. This symbolized the beginning of a new phase in South Africa's history. In April 1994, South Africa held its first democratic elections in which all citizens, regardless of race, could participate. As a result, Nelson Mandela became the first black president of South Africa.
I have spoken about freedom in my lifetime. Your struggle, your commitment, and your discipline has released me to stand before you today.
After sanctions were lifted, house music flooded into South Africa, becoming the soundtrack to an era of huge social and political change. During this time, DJs began to add their own style to the genre, slowing the tracks down to 110 BPM and adding their own lyrics. This new style, which came from the townships, was called Kwaito. Its name comes from the word kwai, which is local slang for cool or hot. Kwaito quickly became a symbol of a new generation that yearned for freedom, self-expression, and positive change. Although some argue that Kwaito existed before 1994, DJ Oskido, one of the pioneers of the sound, believes that its creation is a direct response to the end of apartheid. By the late 1990s, house and kwaito became mainstream genres in South Africa, the equivalent of pop music in the West. Thanks to radio stations, the sounds of electronic dance music could be heard from taxis, supermarkets, hair salons, as well as in clubs and parties at all hours of the day. South African DJ Black Coffee could be the perfect personification of the journey of Afro House since the mid-2000s. The artist went from being a relatively unknown DJ to becoming the first American musician to win the 2022 Grammy Award for Best Dance/Electronic Album.
A race is just a game.
Kwaito is based on simple but expressive beats and bass lines, as well as lyrics in local languages including Zulu, Xhosa, Sesotho, and Afrikaans. The main emphasis was on repetitive phrases and emotional delivery. Kwaito quickly became a cultural phenomenon in South Africa, especially among young people. Its development coincided with the country's era of democratization, and the genre became the unofficial soundtrack of a new beginning. In the early 2000s, Kwaito gained popularity outside South Africa, particularly in the United States and the United Kingdom. Many early Kwaito songs reflect decades of oppression, and the lyrics use old anti-apartheid slogans. In addition, the generation that made Kwaito the leading genre of contemporary South African music continues to live in a changing country and still faces various problems and challenges in a new society. One of the first breakthroughs in the genre was the hit song Shibobo by the band TKZ, created for the 1998 FIFA World Cup. Since the mid-2000s, the genre's popularity has begun to decline, but a new style has taken its place, called Amapiano. The name Amapiano translates from Zulu as piano, reflecting the key role of melodic keyboard parts in the music of this style. The Amapiano genre emerged as a fusion of several musical styles, including Kwaito, deep house, and jazz. The first Amapiano tracks were created in Johannesburg suburbs such as Soweto and Pretoria, where young producers experimented with electronic music, adding distinctive rhythms and melodies. Amapiano is characterized by smooth, deep bass, melodic keyboard parts, and a clear but unobtrusive percussive rhythm. The genre has a recognizable sound that combines dance energy with dreamy melodies. Amapiano quickly became a phenomenon. Unlike many other genres, it was actively distributed through social networks and messengers. Tracks from such pioneers of the genre as Kabza De Small, DJ Maphorisa, Major League DJs, and Tyler ICU became the soundtracks for house parties and street dances. The main themes of Amapiano were the everyday lives of young people: joy, romance, partying, and self-expression. This made the genre a favorite among a new generation of South Africans who wanted to see their lives reflected in music. The king of this genre is deservedly considered a producer named Kabza De Small. His work has become an integral part of the modern South African music scene. An equally important name for this genre is Tyler ICU. The young but influential producer and performer became one of the driving forces of the amapiano genre. His tracks have a minimalist sound that only emphasizes the emotional vocals and sophisticated arrangements. Thanks to hits that quickly go viral, Tyler ICU has established himself as one of the main figures of the modern music scene. Another artist whose music defines the sound of modern amapiano is Mas Musiek. A young producer and DJ born in South Africa, he quickly became one of the key representatives of the genre, bringing a unique combination of deep bass, gentle melodies, and vocal harmonies to the music. Themba Sakoe, known as DJ Maphorisa, is one of the key figures in contemporary South African music. He grew up in Pretoria, started his career as a house producer, but later became one of the pioneers of amapiano. DJ Maphorisa has collaborated with many stars, including Wizkid, Drake, and Major Lazer, proving once again that South African music can conquer the whole world. This movie and put the shit on repeat. I hope this memories are making you fall asleep before we hit the road, put our phones on. Kelvin Momo is a maestro of the amapiano genre, known for his ability to create slow jams with deep atmospheric sounds. His work combines modern electronics with traditional South African motifs. Albums like Ivy League showcase his musical prowess, and collaborations with other artists have made his name recognizable among amapiano fans around the world. Vocalist and composer Mahu has quickly become one of the most beautiful voices in modern amapiano. Her music is a combination of gentle, emotional vocals and rhythms that make you move. Her unique style is based on her ability to add depth and drama to tracks, creating true musical gems. She not only creates music, but also tells stories about love, struggle, and the beauty of life. Interestingly, in a recent interview, the singer said that her songs are liked not only by listeners, but also by musicians. She said that even Lil Wayne and Jay-Z wrote her compliments. Whether this is true or not is unknown, but the compliments are well-deserved. Amapiano could be the subject of a separate video. There are so many artists working in this genre in South Africa. But we need to talk about others too, so let's round off this small section with Uncle Waffles, one of the most energetic and recognizable figures on the modern amapiano scene. Perhaps one of the most famous bands from South Africa in the world is Antwoord. The band's countdown started in 2009 when their first studio album, SOS, was released. At that time, the video for the song Enter the Ninja simply broke the internet. Here you have the sweet voice Yo-Landi in a school uniform, reminiscent of Britney in her prime, and the scenery inspired by the work of freak photographer Roger Ballin, and the cherry on the cake, a DJ with progeria, a genetic disease that causes premature aging of the body. Shocking, Antwoord claim that they are the preachers of the South African culture Zef. According to them, Zef is when you're poor, but fashionable and sexy. You have no money, but you have style. Ninja and Yolanda clearly had style, and by that time, money had already appeared. In just a year, they managed to release a track with Diplo about male circumcision in Africa, sign a contract with one of the largest labels, Interscope Records, perform at the Coachella Music Festival, and go on an international tour. It finally became clear that a new name had appeared in world music when Jared Leto wrote about them with enthusiasm on social media.
I think you're freaky and I like you a lot. I think you're freaky and I like you a lot.
Antwoord's image is so bright and impressive that even filmmakers couldn't ignore them. Yo-Landi and Ninja were invited to play themselves in Neil Blomkamp's fantastic action movie, Chappie. The famous South African film director was nominated for an Oscar in the Best Adapted Screenplay category, but definitely not for Chappie. The latter failed miserably at the box office, was crushed by critics, and the previously planned sequel was decided not to be made. Did this affect Ninja and Yo-Landi? Yes. Thanks to the film, they became recognizable not only to the music audience, but also to the film audience. Since 2020, the band has not been actively releasing music, and their names appear in the press more often due to scandals. For example, a few years ago, Yo-Landi and Ninja's son accused his parents of violence. In response to the allegations, Ninja and Yo-Landi released a statement on social media in which they denied all allegations and stated that their adopted son suffers from mental illness. The band is currently touring the world with concerts, of course, only in cities where their concerts are not canceled due to fear or scandals. South Africa is not the safest country on earth. Sometimes people are kidnapped there for ransom. Sometimes even musicians are kidnapped. In August 2017, the South African soul musician Vusi Nova was abducted along with his friends from his home in the Melville area of Johannesburg. The incident occurred as the band was returning home after a performance. The attackers, armed with firearms, forced Vusi and his friends out of the car, after which they stole them and the car. Although the musician's friends were released after some time, Vusi himself was held hostage for a long time in an unknown location. The attackers beat him and threatened him with violence. Eventually, Vusi was released and left on the street. Fortunately, the musician was not seriously injured, although he was very scared and psychologically traumatized. Despite this, he continued his career. And if Vusi was, one might say, lucky, then a rapper named Kiernan Forbes, or simply AKA, was not so lucky. He was shot dead in Durban as he left a restaurant with friends. The incident occurred in a crowded area, and it shocked not only the musician's fans, but the entire country. AKA was an iconic figure in the South African hip-hop scene, his work receiving recognition not only at home, but also abroad. He had numerous awards and a successful career, collaborating with many famous artists. The investigation is ongoing, but as of now, no perpetrators have been found. AKA's tragic death has left a deep mark on the hearts of his fans, and has become a symbol of the unrest and instability that still plagues daily life in the country.
Jiggy, heavy, heavy, all the girls love me, oh, like money.
We can't help but mention the woman who was called the Queen of African Pop and the Madonna of the townships. Her name was Brenda Fassie. Fassie's most famous album, Weekend Special, brought her international fame, and the song Black President became a symbol of the struggle for freedom and was dedicated to Nelson Mandela. Her vibrant image and bold statements made Fassie an icon for many generations. Her life was filled with both incredible successes and scandals related to addiction, which killed the singer when she was 39 years old. Fassie's death was a national tragedy. Her music inspired millions, and she left a significant mark on South African culture. But as we know, legends never die. Therefore, I suggest you get to know the artists who've already become legends for some and continue to create music in South Africa today. You can start with the band Congos, consisting of 4 brothers who were born in South Africa but moved to the US. Their style ranges from alternative rock to African rhythms. They became famous thanks to the song Come With Me Now. Their music's noted for its unusual use of the accordion, which gives them a unique sound. Seether is considered one of the most famous rock bands in South Africa. Since 1999, they've been playing post-grunge with elements of alternative metal and have tens of millions of views on their videos. The band's vocalist and guitarist, Sean Morgan, has openly admitted to being inspired by bands like Nirvana, Alice in Chains, and Pearl Jam. Their breakthrough came with the album Disclaimer, which included the hit Broken, a duet with Amy Lee from Evanescence. Another rock band that has brought South African music to the international stage is Prime Circle. Their style can be described as a harmonious combination of alternative rock and powerful emotional lyrics.
Find that I am shaking from my head down to my feet.
Since their debut in 2002, the band has released several platinum albums and won numerous music awards. Their concerts draw thousands of fans, and singles like She Always Gets What She Wants are on the playlists of rock fans around the world.
She always gets what she needs and more.
The alternative scene in South Africa can be explored for quite some time. But first of all, it's worth mentioning A King, one of the most famous alternative rock bands.
Looking at the sky as the wind plays through the skirts of the...
Formed in 2007, the band quickly gained popularity among indie and rock fans, adding a touch of South African flair to their compositions. Their music is often played at festivals, creating an atmosphere of freedom and inspiration. Even punk rock is a little different in South Africa.
Safe as houses stuck me in.
The band Fukofopoliskar has turned the perception of Afrikaans music upside down. Their provocative style and lyrics often touch on social issues, breaking down stereotypes about what South African punk should be. Their album Swanesang has become a real manifesto for fans of alternative rock, and the energy at concerts makes this band a cult. See for yourself this pleasant atmosphere. The main personas of the South African duo, formed back in the 90s, composer Theo Kagonsingwe, lead singer Nulano Mafu, sing in the Kwaito genre, which we talked about earlier. Their compositions successfully combine slow rhythms, African percussion, and vocals from a mixture of English and the languages of the traditional tribes of South Africa, the Zulu and Xhosa. On top of everything, Mafikizolo are three-time winners of the South African Music Award, the local version of the Grammy. Blue-eyed blonde, Swith, and South African by blood, Jeremy Loops paved his way from a budding artist in his native Cape Town to a renowned international musician. In 2015, he became the Breakthrough of the Year, performing on the 21 Pilots tour and playing his solo albums in Europe and the US, gathering up to 30,000 listeners.
We loan our bones from the grave. Suppose I never cared much, but who could?
His singles Waves, Freak, and Critical as Water debuted in the top 5 on iTunes in the Netherlands, Germany, Switzerland, Australia, and South Africa, paving the way for a world tour.
I won't stop till I've found you. I won't stop.
South African singer Amanda Black began singing in early childhood in the church pew and continued on stage, choosing the Afro soul genre with touches of hip-hop and R&B. Listening to this singer, you know for sure that Beyoncé and Whitney Houston were her sources of inspiration. In her compositions, she switches freely between English and her native Xhosa, emphasizing her belonging to these people with her painted face and colorful outfits. In 2016, her single Amasulu was nominated for several music awards, and her first album went platinum 3 weeks after its release. 22-year-old singer Tyla, whose real name is Tyla Laura Sithal, is confidently conquering the world stage. Her style combines Afro-pop, R&B, and modern pop, creating a unique sound that has already won over millions of listeners. Born in Johannesburg, she started out posting her tracks on social media before signing with Epic Records. Tyla is also the youngest African artist in history to win a Grammy.
And you don't want no way, but I won't waste your time and baby.
Her breakthrough came with the viral track Getting Late. Since then, Tyla has continued to captivate fans with her bold style and charismatic performances, becoming the voice of a younger generation of South African musicians. Sally Mukwango's voice is also hard to ignore. Her incredible vocals combine deep religious motifs with modern gospel elements. This singer is famous for her spiritual compositions that are truly moving. Her album, Jesus Is Enough, became a real breakthrough in the gospel genre, and Zali herself received recognition not only in South Africa but also abroad as one of the brightest performers of this style. Electronic duo Goldfish are distinguished by their fusion of jazz, house, and acoustic instruments. Dominic Peters and David Poole create music that sounds equally exciting at a beach party or at international festivals.
Back in the day, oh yeah, some time ago, walking to school through here.
Their live performances became legendary thanks to their use of saxophone, double bass, and keyboards. The album Perceptions of Pacha became a cult classic and opened the doors for them to the European and American stages.
Played for the class, they all asked for one more. The video clip that we made.
A young star named Elaine successfully combines R&B, soul, and pop. Her debut project Elements was a hit, and songs like You're the One have received millions of streams on streaming platforms.
I think it's time we confronted the situation in front.
The fusion of soul music and house music has also made singer Zakes Bontwini famous. His track Osama became an international hit, confirming his status as an innovative and unique artist. Zakes always strives to combine traditional African motifs with a modern sound, which makes his work universal and at the same time authentic. Zahara, whose real name is Bulewa Mukutakana, has won the hearts of listeners with her deep, soulful voice. Her songs like Loliwe reflect the beauty and power of African culture. Her debut album went platinum within days of its release, and Zahara herself became a symbol of inspiration for young people striving to find their voice in the world of music. It's also important to mention a singer named Alice Phoebe Liu. Her music is difficult to categorize into one genre. It's a mix of indie, folk, jazz, and electronic, which create a unique sound.
You've got this golden way of making my body sway.
Her albums, such as Orbit and Glow, have gained recognition outside her native country, and the song She was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Original Song in 2018. Alice Phoebe Liu is an example of a modern independent artist whose talent reminds us that music has no boundaries and is a universal language that unites people around the world.
I see the sunlight dripping, it touches my skin.
Singer Lady Zamar successfully combines African soul, R&B, Afro-pop, and house. She became popular due to her unique voice and ability to mix genres, as well as create unforgettable hits.
I need to speak to Charlotte. I need to call Charlotte. I need to tell Charlotte.
Despite the fact that South Africa is obviously dominated by Amapiano, there's also plenty of hip-hop there, and artists like to mix genres. Before we move on to hip-hop, I'd like to ask, what country are you watching this video from? Write in the comments, and we'll read it and understand which country we should write about next time. Thank you, and let's continue. One of the most influential rappers and producers in South Africa is K.O. His style combines hip-hop with traditional African rhythms, earning him the status of an innovator in the genre. He began his career as a member of the cult band Tear Gas, and after the group's breakup, launched a successful solo career. His album Skanda Republic became a classic of South African hip-hop, and the hit City solidified the artist's reputation as one of the best rappers. South African rapper Nasty C has become a global phenomenon, mastering hardcore rap, lyrical depth, and an international sound. Nasty C's success began with the album Bad Hair, and tracks like SMA and Black and White demonstrate his ability to skillfully balance emotion and technique.
I buy some, put you on some, be the hand that catch your tears and still be your shoulder.
Through collaborations with artists like T.I. or A$AP Ferg, he showed the world that South African hip-hop has its own unique voice.
You niggas got balls talking all that shit. Niggas these days talk more than a bitch. Internet gangster, click boy, click.
South African rapper Focalistic, whose real name is Lethabo Sebetso, called his music the soundtrack for every city dweller. He creates a unique blend of hip-hop and amapiano, paying homage to his native Pretoria. His biggest hit, K-Star, has had millions of people dancing not only in Africa but around the world. Focalistic confidently experiments with genres, proving that South African music can be contemporary yet authentic. A rapper named Casper Nyovest is known for his distinguished career in hip-hop. He rose to fame in the late 2000s when he released several successful albums and singles, becoming one of the most popular artists in Africa. His musical success is backed by major industry awards, including multiple South African hip-hop awards, and in addition to music, Casper's also actively developing his career as an entrepreneur. He's launched his own label, Family Tree, and is actively working to promote African culture on the global stage. His impact on the industry is also highlighted by the fact that he became one of the first artists to successfully perform a concert at a football stadium in South Africa.
Let's pick it up. Where we left off, it's for the have-nots. Y'all niggas mad soft, the undercarpet.
The rapper Sajava's debut album was released in 2015. His fusion of hip-hop, folk, and soul, as well as hits with sensual and deep lyrics, made him famous across the continent. In 2018, Sajava became the first South African artist to win the BET Award for Best International Performance in the hip-hop category, further solidifying his status as an important figure in the African music industry. Another key rapper on the South African scene is Big Zulu, who went from being a taxi driver to one of the biggest hip-hop stars. He grew up in Bergville, a small village where music was always an important part of his life. From an early age, Big Zulu listened to and loved a variety of music. Whether it was the music of struggle, happiness, or love, music was a language that everyone understood and appreciated. This early experience laid the foundation for his future career, and it was at school in Johannesburg that he discovered his passion for rap. After school, he worked in a taxi service, but still found time for rap battles. The turning point, though, was his victory in the rap competition Back to Your City, after which Big Zulu gradually gained recognition. No one's surprised by a rapper talking about social issues, but in countries like South Africa, it's almost their duty. Rapper Kwesta, who rightfully considers himself the king of African rap, dreamed of becoming a footballer or a writer as a child. As a child, Kwesta was a recluse and introvert, which later turned into acutely social lyrics for his hip-hop. His most famous album, Dakar 2, brought him immense recognition and several awards, including a South African Music Award. His single, Ngud, was particularly popular, becoming a hit and paving the way for the artist on the international stage. A major achievement was founding his own label with Kid X called Rap Life Records, which has many projects including promoting rap duo TLT, just one of the many talents signed to his label. South African rap is a genre that is constantly changing. At the moment, Kwesta says, it reflects a more liberated youth, freedom of speech, and what young people are really facing. As you can see, there are so many genres, artists, and music in South Africa that it would be almost impossible to talk about them all. Even the greatest ones. I'd like to end this issue with something classic. For example, the voice of the great Miriam Makeba, who was called Mother Africa for a reason. Well, today our journey through the music world of South Africa has come to an end, and I hope you discovered something new, unexpected, that you'd want to add to your playlist. As you can see, music here is often a way of struggle, unity, and expression of pain, joy, and freedom, from the deep melodies of jazz and Afro soul to the modern rhythms of Amapiano and Kwaito. Each genre reflects the history, culture, and spirit of this amazing country that continues to go through difficult times. Music in South Africa has been a voice of protest, a force for change, and a source of hope for generations. And even today, it continues to capture hearts around the world while still maintaining its unique identity. Thank you for being with us. Like, subscribe to the channel, and write in the comments what country or musical style you'd like to learn about next time. This was the Melomania channel, and see you in the new videos.